Hello there, welcome back guys. Welcome back to a brand new video of Mighty Ghost Tag YouTube channel. So guys, this video is the 8th video on interview questions. So in this video, we are basically looking into the one of the advanced topic in JavaScript, which is known as the closure. So the closure concept is very important if you wanted to understand JavaScript more briefly, and it is one of the favorite questions which interviewer mostly ask. So let's understand JavaScript closure more briefly. So in this video, we will understand the JavaScript closure with the help of the scope and lexical scope example. So first, take a look into the closure definition. So the closure is a function that has the access to the outer function variable. So what it says? So it says closure is a function. So there could be a single function that have the access of its inner variable as well as the outer function variable. So this definition might confusing you, but hold on here. We will see more briefly about this. And second point, the closure can access its own variable, outer scope variable, and the global scope variable. This is what I just say. It is a function that can have the access of its own variable, outer scope variable, as well as global scope variable. Now, the closure is created when a child function keep the environment of parent scope even after the parent function has been already executed. So these three statements is actually denoting the closure definition. We will understand the closure more briefly, but even before that, let's understand what is scope and what is lexical scope. So to explain you about the scope, let me copy this example. Let me put here. Now let me run this example. So the output what I get is hi John. Now if you see, this is the variable which is declared outside this function, and I can access this variable inside this function as well, because this variable is available globally. But in the case of this variable, the message one is actually declared inside this curly braces. So if I wanted to access this message outside of this function, it is not possible. That is not possible just because of the scope in JavaScript. So for this video, you just have to remember that global function can be accessible everywhere, and the variable which is declared inside this curly braces can be accessible inside this curly braces only. If I wanted to access this outside, that is not possible. So that's why the my name is getting print here, and the message is also accessed inside this function. Let me show you. If I try to access this outside, what happened? See, the message is not defined. So that is happened just because of the scope in JavaScript. And if you wanted to understand the scope concept more briefly, then I will recommend please check out my earlier video which I uploaded on the scope itself. I will provide that video link in the description. Also you can watch that video from click on the I button. Now you understand the scope. Now let's see what is a lexical scope. So for the lexical scope, let me copy this example and let me put here. Now if I run this, the output I will get is 111. Now first understand this main function. So this main function has the one variable with the one value. Now if you remember what I just said, this function can be accessible inside the curly braces. So it is inside this, so it can be accessible everywhere. Even if you declare another function, okay, and still you can access this variable here also. So that is happened just because of the lexical scope. Now You might be asking, if I declare another variable here, like where a equal to 10, now if I try to access outside here, that is not possible. As per the basic definition, a variable declared inside this block can be accessible inside only. Now if I wanted to access this a here, if I run this program again, see, a is not defined. But in the case of b, it is possible because b is available to the outside curly braces. So that's why this b is actually available to this function as well. So this concept is actually known as a lexical scope, and this piece of code is an example of the normal scope. Now you understand the normal scope and the lexical scope. Now we will move further to understand closure more briefly. So for that, let me copy this example. Let me put here. So this is the single function which actually return the another function. Now if you see, this function have the single input parameter, and this inner function also have the single input parameter, but these two inputs actually different. And lastly, that inner function return the concatenation of first input parameter and the second input parameter, which is the inner input parameter. Now, so to invoke this kind of function, you can refer like this. So here the parent function will get invoked by passing the hi message, and it will refer to the another variable. And to invoke the inner function as well, you can call this function like this. So ultimately what happened, you will get the hi mighty and the hello mighty output. Let me show you that. See, the hi mighty and the hello mighty. So this is what the example of the closure. So this is what the use case of the closure. Now let's take a look into the definition. So the closure is a function that has the access of the outer function variable. Now what it says, the closure is the function that have the access of the outer function variable. So here outer function variable should be the message. Now you can see this inner function have the access of the outer variable, outer function variable. Now the closure can access its own scope variable, outer scope variable, as well as the global scope variable. So this is the own scope variable, outer scope variable, and the global scope variable that is not declared here, but you can write like this, like where, like I will simply rename it as a reaction. So this is the global scope variable, and I can simply concatenate here. So this will also provide us the output. So this function can access its own scope variable, outer scope variable, and the global scope variable. Now, this third definition. The closure is created when a child function keeps the environment of the parent scope even after the parent's function has been executed. What it means? So this child function will keep the environment of this parent function even after this parent function get executed, which means actually here the parent function will get called, but still it will keep the environment, the variable, and the scope for the inner child. Now let's take a look into the another closure example. So this is another typical example of the closure, and this is what actually the use case of closure where it is actually getting used. Now here it is a single function. The function can contain the another function, and that inner function have the access of the parent variable, and what it does, it will simply incrementing. And lastly, that function is getting returned. This return statement is a nothing but like what we just saw, like this way also you can return, or you can simply return its name. That is also possible. Also, you don't require the name as well, you can directly return the inner function as well. So these are the different scenarios to write the code. Now here what happened, the parent function is getting called, and to invoke the all the function execution, the variable is called like this. Now what it will does, it actually increment the counter variable with its own value. Now let me show you what it's mean. If I execute this 1 2 3 and 4, now you might be wonder how this happened. So this is happened just because the third definition which we just saw. Let me again remind you that definition. See, the closure is created, yes, when the child function keep the environment of the parent function scope. Now let me explain you. So this function is an example of closure. Now what happened? To call this function, it simply refer to the counter variable. Now this counter variable is actually executed parent function already. Now if you see, this counter will hold this inner variable value as a 0. Now 0 is already hold here. Now if I call it multiple times, what happened? 0 is getting incremented to the 1. So that's why the 1 is getting printed. Again, see what it says, it will keep the environment of parent scope. Now in this scenario, the variable is already incremented, so it is a 1. Then again it's incremented to 2, 3 and 4. Likewise it will continuously getting incremented. So that is what the advantages of closure over the other functions. And I hope you understand this third statement more briefly, because this is what the whole closure means. Now let's see what are the key points we have to remember while working with the JavaScript closure. So the closure is a function that captures the variable from lexical scope. Lexical scope, let me again remind you, the inner function have the access to its parent variable. The closure is useful for the data privacy of the program. This is what the another use case of the closure. Closure allow event handler and callback to capture variable. Yeah, this is another use case of the closure. If you remember the set timeout, set interval, which also we are invoking inside the another function, so which can also access the parent scope variable. So this is what it says. So I hope you understand the JavaScript closure, the advanced concept more briefly. So if you have any doubt, you can comment out below. We will meet again with another JavaScript video. Till then, bye.